The carriage wheels ground to a halt before Thornfield Manor, and Margaret Fairleigh pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window. 3 years. She had not seen her country house in 3 years. Not since the physicians in London had sworn that German baths and electrical treatments would restore her womb to fertility. The promises had been empty, same as her body. The November wind sliced through her gray traveling cloak as she stepped down, boots crunching on gravel choked with dead leaves. She had sent no word of her arrival. There was no one to send word to. The house should be locked, silent, waiting like a mausoleum for the Duchess who had failed her one essential task. She climbed the stone steps, key trembling in her hand. But when she grasped the iron handle, the door shifted, unlocked, slightly ajar. Margaret went still. Then she heard it. A baby's cry. Thin, desperate, utterly impossible. Her hand flew to her chest. She pushed the door wider. The entrance hall should have been dark, dust-shrouded. Instead, a single candle burned in the corridor sconce, and the sound came again. A newborn's wail, fragile and insistent, echoing from somewhere deep within. Margaret's throat constricted. She had not held an infant in 5 years. Had not allowed herself to be near one since the last failed pregnancy, the one that had left her bleeding for 3 days while the midwife whispered to Edmund that her Grace's womb was inhospitable to life. But she moved forward anyway. Old instincts awakening with each step. The crying intensified, coming from upstairs. From the east wing. From the nursery. Margaret took the stairs, pulse hammering. The corridor stretched before her, dim and narrow. Only one door showed light beneath its frame, the nursery she had decorated 6 years ago in foolish, hopeful cream and rose. The room she had locked after the 3rd miscarriage and sworn never to open again. The door stood ajar. She pushed it open. An infant lay in the antique cradle, barely visible beneath swaddling of fine linen far too rich for a servant's child. The baby's face was red, twisted in distress, small fists flailing. But it was the note pinned to the blanket that made Margaret's vision blur. She crossed the room in 3 strides, lifted the child, warm, real, impossibly alive, and cradled him against her chest. The crying softened to hiccuping whimpers. Only then did she unpin the note. They are coming for him at dawn. You are his only chance. His name is Samuel. God heard my prayers. Now he must hear yours. Margaret read it twice. Her hands began to shake. She looked down at the infant, Samuel, his eyes squeezed shut, perhaps 2 weeks old. And someone had left him here, in her nursery, in the room where all her dreams had died. Then she felt it. His skin beneath the linen was cold. Too cold. Panic seized her. She pressed her cheek to his forehead, icy. His lips held a faint blue tinge. How long had he been here alone in the November chill? Margaret moved without thinking. She yanked the dustcloth from the cradle, revealing the small fireplace she'd had installed years ago. Her hands fumbled with flint and kindling, striking again and again until sparks caught. The fire blazed to life. She unwrapped Samuel with shaking fingers, checking for injury. His tiny body was rigid with cold, his breathing shallow. She stripped off her traveling cloak and loosened her dress bodice, then pressed him skin to skin against her chest, wrapping them both in the cloak. An old midwife's trick for hypothermic infants. "Stay with me," she whispered, rocking. "Please. Stay with me." His breathing steadied, grew deeper. But his mouth began working, searching, hungry. The pantry. If whoever left him had prepared anything. Margaret carried him downstairs, still pressed against her warmth. In the kitchen she found it, a sealed bottle of goat's milk and a feeding cloth. Fresh. Left today. She warmed the milk over the kitchen fire, tested it against her wrist, then settled into a chair and guided the cloth to Samuel's lips. He latched desperately, gulping, choking slightly before finding rhythm. Margaret watched his face as he fed, the way his tiny fingers curled against her collarbone, the flutter of his eyelids, the absolute trust in his surrender to sleep. 3 years ago, Dr. Pemberton had looked at her over his spectacles and said, "Your Grace, some women are simply not designed for motherhood. It is God's will. You must accept it." She had believed him, had carried that poison in her heart for 36 months. But holding Samuel now, feeling the weight of him, the warmth, the need, she understood something the doctor never could. Her womb might be empty, but her arms were not. When Samuel finally slept, milk-drunk and warm, Margaret carried him back to the nursery. She laid him in the cradle, tucked blankets around him, and sank into the rocking chair she'd bought for children she would never have. "I don't know who you are," she whispered, touching his downy head, "or why you're here. But I won't let them take you. Not tonight." The fire crackled. Samuel's breathing deepened into true sleep. And Margaret Fairleigh, who had spent 3 years running from her failures, stayed. Outside, the darkness thinned toward dawn. Margaret had not slept. She sat in the nursery rocking chair, watching Samuel's chest rise and fall, counting each breath like a miser counting coins. The note lay in her lap, its words burned into her memory. "They are coming for him at dawn." Dawn was 2 hours away. She heard the carriage before she saw it, the rattle of wheels on gravel, the whicker of horses being reined to a halt. Margaret's heart seized. Too early. Whoever was hunting Samuel had come too early. She flew to the window. The carriage bore the Thornfield crest. Edmund. Margaret's breath left her in a rush, relief and panic warring for dominance. She scooped Samuel from the cradle, careful not to wake him, and laid him in the padded drawer she'd pulled from the bureau. Not hidden, she would not hide him like contraband, but out of immediate sight. She smoothed her hair, tried to shake the wrinkles from her traveling dress, and failed spectacularly. 3 years of marriage had taught her that Edmund noticed everything, especially imperfection. His boots sounded on the stairs as she descended to meet him. He stood in the entrance hall, road dust on his greatcoat, jaw tight with whatever emotion he'd been nursing during the ride from London. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Not relief. Assessment. "You left London without word," he said. "No greeting. No warmth. The physician said you walked out during the consultation." The physician said many things. Margaret's voice came out sharper than intended. All lies. Edmund's eyes narrowed. "Margaret." A cry pierced the silence. High, thin, unmistakably infant. Edmund's head snapped toward the stairs. What was that? Nothing. Margaret moved to block his path. A bird. The house settles. The cry came again. Louder now, insistent. Edmund's expression hardened. "Step aside." "Edmund, please." But he was already moving past her skirts and taking the stairs 2 at a time. He found the nursery without hesitation. Stood in the doorway, staring at the drawer where Samuel now wailed, small fists flailing. "Whose child is that?" Edmund's voice was dangerously quiet. Margaret pushed past him, lifted Samuel, pressed him to her shoulder. The baby quieted immediately, nuzzling against her neck. "A tenant's child," she said. The lie tasted like ash. "I'm watching him while." "Don't." Edmund crossed the room in 3 strides, yanked the blanket from where she draped it over the chair. He examined the fabric, his fingers finding the monogrammed edge. Then he saw the note. He snatched it before Margaret could react. She watched his face as he read, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his hands begin to tremble. House Ashford. His voice was hollow. "Margaret, do you understand what this means? Do you have any conception of—" "I know exactly what it means." "Then you know harboring this child is treason. That seal, if he's who I think he is." Edmund's eyes were wild now, desperate. "They will hang you. Strip me of my title. Destroy everything." "Everything." Margaret's laugh was bitter. "What everything, Edmund? This empty house? Our hollow marriage? The title you wear like a noose because I couldn't give you an heir? That's not. Isn't it?" She held Samuel tighter. 3 years. 3 years of doctors poking and prodding me like livestock. 3 years of whispers at court about the Barren Duchess. 3 years of you looking at me like I was a broken thing you'd purchased in good faith but received defective. Edmund flinched. I never. You did. Margaret's voice cracked. You do. Every time you look at me I see it. The disappointment. The failure. I'm not your wife, Edmund. I'm your greatest mistake. The silence that followed was devastating. Edmund's jaw worked. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. That child is not yours. He is now. Margaret. He was left in my care. In my nursery. The room I prepared for children I would never have. Someone chose me, Edmund. For once in my miserable life, someone looked at the Barren Duchess and thought, she's enough. Edmund stared at her. At Samuel. At the note still clutched in his white-knuckled hand. Whose child is this, Margaret? His voice had lost its edge. Now it was just tired. Truly. Margaret met his eyes. Saw something there she'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment. Fear. For her. Does it matter? She whispered. He's mine now. Samuel made a small sound against her neck, his tiny hand curling into her hair. Edmund closed his eyes. God help us both. Dawn broke cold and gray over Thornfield Manor. Margaret stood at the nursery window, Samuel sleeping against her shoulder, and watched the horizon lighten. The deadline had passed. No one had come. She should have felt relief. Instead, dread coiled tighter in her chest. They are coming. Not they came. Present tense. Inevitable. Behind her, Edmund paced. He had not left. Had not demanded she surrender the child or summoned the authorities. He had simply stayed, coat discarded, sleeves rolled to his elbows, wearing a path in the carpet she'd chosen 6 years ago in another life. Let me see it again, he said quietly. Margaret shifted Samuel carefully into the cradle, then retrieved the note from where Edmund had left it on the bureau. She handed it to him, their fingers brushing. He pulled back as if burned. Edmund read it for the 4th time, his lips moving silently over the words. Then he turned it over, examining the wax seal in the growing light. House Ashford, he murmured. The Lord Chancellor's family crest. He looked up at her, his face grave. Margaret, Lady Catherine Ashford, died 3 weeks ago. Childbirth complications. It was kept quiet, but the gossip at court. He stopped. They said she died unwed. That there was no child. Margaret's stomach lurched. But Samuel is 3 weeks old at most. Edmund's voice was hollow. And if Catherine Ashford left him here with this note, he didn't finish. Didn't need to. Margaret sank into the rocking chair. Lady Catherine. She had known her distantly. A shy girl with kind eyes who had served as lady-in-waiting to the Queen. There had been whispers about her and Prince Henry, the king's younger brother, but Margaret had paid little attention to court intrigue. If Samuel is Prince Henry's son, she whispered, then he's a threat to the succession. Edmund's jaw tightened. The king has no legitimate heirs. Henry is next in line. An illegitimate child complicates everything. They'll want him dead. The word fell like a stone. Edmund didn't deny it. A knock sounded downstairs, sharp and urgent. They both froze. Margaret's maid, Mrs. Hewitt, one of the few servants who'd remained at Thornfield, appeared in the doorway, breathless. Your Grace, Your Grace. She curtsied quickly. Thomas from the village just arrived. Says there's men at the tavern. Royal agents. Asking about a woman traveling alone. And a child. The room tilted. Margaret gripped the chair arms to steady herself. When? Edmund's voice was sharp. They arrived an hour ago, Your Grace. Thomas rode straight here to warn us. Edmund dismissed her with a nod. The moment she left, he turned to Margaret. We have to move him. No. Get him to safety before. No. Edmund stared at her. Margaret, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Margaret rose, moved to stand between him and the cradle. 3 years, Edmund. 3 years of doctors telling me I'm broken. Priests saying God has judged me. Court ladies whispering I've failed you. Physicians treating me like a broodmare who won't breed. Her voice cracked. And now a child who needs me appears, and you want me to give him up? No. If this is treason, hang me. But I will not fail him the way I failed us. The silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Edmund's throat worked. When he spoke, his voice was rough with something that might have been pain. You didn't fail us, Margaret. I did. She blinked, shocked. I made you feel worthless. I let you believe. He stopped, dragged a hand through his hair. God forgive me. I let you believe your only value was in bearing children. And when you couldn't, I didn't know how to. He turned away. I'm sorry. Margaret's eyes burned. In 7 years of marriage, Edmund had never apologized. Not once. He faced her again, jaw set with new resolve. Then we don't fail him. We claim he's ours. What? We claim Samuel as our son. Born here in secret. You fled London, came to Thornfield, and gave birth alone. Edmund's words came faster now, gaining momentum. It explains the secrecy. Explains why you're here. If anyone asks about the royal agents, we know nothing about a woman traveling alone. You've been here for weeks. Margaret's heart hammered. They'll never believe. They'll have no choice. Edmund crossed to the fireplace, held the note over the flames. Without this, there's no proof Samuel is anyone but ours. Catherine's dead. Prince Henry won't acknowledge him. And Ashford. His expression hardened. Ashford will do anything to prevent scandal. Even accept our lie if it means burying his daughter's shame. The note blackened, curled, turned to ash. Edmund met her eyes across the nursery. Are you with me? Margaret looked at Samuel, sleeping peacefully despite the storm gathering around him. Looked at her husband, this man she'd shared a life with but never truly known. Yes, she whispered. I'm with you. Neither of them knew what they were doing. Margaret discovered this truth within the first hour, when Samuel woke screaming and she realized his swaddling was soaked through. She stared at the writhing infant, then at Edmund. Do you know how to? Absolutely not. They fumbled through it together, Edmund holding Samuel's kicking legs while Margaret wrestled with the cloth diaper and pins. By the end, the baby was clean, but Edmund had been baptized in ways no duke should ever experience. This, he said, examining his ruined sleeve with barely concealed horror, is why the nobility employs nurses. We can't employ a nurse. Margaret tied off the diaper. Crooked, but functional. Not without questions. Edmund's expression darkened at the reminder. They were alone in this deception. Utterly, dangerously alone. The morning progressed in a series of small disasters. Margaret attempted porridge for herself and Edmund, only to burn it black while attending to Samuel's crying. Edmund tried to warm milk and nearly started a fire. By noon, they were exhausted, hungry, and covered in various infant-related substances neither wished to name. We're going to kill him through sheer incompetence, Margaret said, slumped at the kitchen table while Samuel dozed in her arms. We're not. Edmund scraped the burned porridge into the slop bucket. We're learning. You sound remarkably optimistic for a man who just lost a battle with oatmeal. The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. That night, Margaret sat in the nursery rocking chair, guiding the milk-soaked cloth to Samuel's eager mouth. Edmund had surprised her by staying, settling into the other chair with a book of poetry he'd found in the library. He read aloud, Donne, then Marlowe, his voice low and soothing. Samuel's eyes drifted closed. Margaret found herself relaxing for the first time in days, lulled by the rhythm of Edmund's voice and the weight of the child in her arms. The treatments, Edmund said suddenly, setting the book aside. In London. What did they do to you? Margaret's hands stilled. She'd never told him. Had never wanted him to know the full extent of her humiliation. Everything, she said finally. Examinations that left me bleeding. Tonics that made me vomit for days. Baths so hot I fainted. Electrical currents applied to. She stopped. They said it would stimulate my womb. Make it receptive. Edmund's face had gone pale. Margaret. The last physician said my pelvis was malformed. That any pregnancy would likely kill me, but we should try anyway because at least you'd be free to remarry a fertile woman. Her voice was steady, but tears tracked down her cheeks. That's when I left. The silence stretched. Then Edmund rose, crossed to her, and sank to his knees beside the chair. He didn't touch her. Just knelt there, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. I thought I was being merciful, he said quietly, by not discussing it, by not forcing you to relive the pain. I see now I was being a coward. I let you bear it alone because I didn't know how to share it. Margaret looked at him. Really looked. Saw the grief carved into the lines around his eyes, the guilt he'd been carrying. I mourned too, Margaret. Every child we lost. Every treatment that failed. I didn't know how to tell you. Her hand found his. Squeezed. The next morning, she showed him the other nursery. The one she'd decorated 5 years ago in ivory and gold, before the first miscarriage. Tiny gowns still hung in the wardrobe. A christening blanket lay folded in tissue. Edmund stood in the doorway, throat working. You kept it all. I couldn't let it go. Margaret's voice was small. It was all I had of them. He pulled her against his chest then, the first embrace in years that felt like comfort rather than duty. That afternoon, they took Samuel to the village apothecary. The lie had to become public, had to be witnessed. Our son, Margaret said when Mr. Davies peered into the blanket. Born here at Thornfield 6 weeks ago. We kept it quiet after. She let her voice break. After the previous losses. Davies's weathered face softened. A blessing, Your Grace. A true blessing. The lie had teeth now. Wait. When they returned home, Samuel smiled for the first time, a small gummy expression of contentment directed at Edmund while he carried him upstairs. Edmund stopped mid-step, staring down at the infant. Did you see? I saw. Margaret's throat tightened. That night, exhausted beyond measure, Margaret dozed in the nursery chair. When she woke near midnight, the fire had burned low. Edmund sat across from her, Samuel sleeping against his chest, one large hand cradling the baby's head. He was whispering something. Margaret held still, listening. I don't know how to be a father, Edmund murmured. But I'll learn. For her. For you. I promise you that, Samuel. I'll learn. Margaret's heart cracked open. She reached for her sketchbook, and in the dying firelight, she drew them. Her husband and the child they'd stolen from fate. The family she never thought she'd have. Outside, somewhere in the darkness, the Crown's agents were searching. But tonight, in this room, they were safe. Tonight, they were whole. 2 weeks passed in a blur of feedings and changings and sleepless nights that somehow felt less empty than the silent years before. They found a rhythm. Fragile, imperfect, but theirs. Margaret hired Mrs. Yates, a widow from the village whose discretion could be bought with fair wages and the promise of steady work. The woman asked no questions about the miracle baby, and proved invaluable in teaching them what instinct couldn't. But the outside world was closing in. Edmund's correspondence grew heavier. Letters arrived in unmarked envelopes, sealed with wax that bore no crest. He read them in his study with the door locked, his expression growing darker with each one. Inquiries, he said finally, when Margaret confronted him. At court. About Catherine Ashford's death. About whether she truly died childless. He met her eyes. Someone saw her during the pregnancy. Someone talked. Margaret's blood ran cold. How long do we have? I don't know. That night, unable to sleep, Margaret sat in the nursery mending Samuel's gowns. The blanket he'd arrived in lay folded beside her. Fine linen with an embroidered edge. She'd washed it days ago, noticed the unusual weight of the hem but thought nothing of it until now. She examined it more closely, felt along the stitching. There, a section sewn with different thread, cruder than the rest. Margaret's hands shook as she unpicked the seam. A small leather journal fell into her lap. The cover bore no name, but the handwriting inside was delicate, feminine, increasingly erratic as the entries progressed. Margaret's heart hammered as she read. June 18th. Henry came to me again last night. I know it's wrong. I know he can never marry me. But when he looks at me, I feel like I matter. Like I'm more than just another ornament in his brother's court. August 3rd, I'm with child. I told Henry. He wept and held me and said we'd find a way. But I see the fear in his eyes. He knows what this means. September 12th. Father knows. He struck me across the face and called me whore. Said I've destroyed the family name. He wants me to take care of it. I won't. I can't. This child is mine. October 20th. Father has me locked in the country house. Says I'll stay here until the birth. Then the child will be given to a farmer's family and I'll return to court as if nothing happened. He doesn't understand. I would rather die than give my baby to strangers. Margaret's vision blurred. She skipped ahead, searching for the final entry. November 2nd. I'm dying. The midwife says the bleeding won't stop. I can feel myself slipping away. Father won't even look at his grandson. Called him evidence that needs to be destroyed. I've made arrangements. A woman I trust will take Samuel to Margaret Fairleigh, Duchess of Thornfield. I met her once at court. Saw how the other ladies mocked her barrenness. Saw the pain in her eyes when she looked at children. She knows what it is to be judged by men who understand nothing of love or sacrifice. She will understand. She will protect him when I cannot. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Protect my son. Lord Ashford will kill him to preserve the family name. Tell Samuel his mother loved him. Tell him he was wanted. That's all that matters in the end. Being wanted. Catherine. Margaret sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. Catherine had chosen her. Not randomly, not desperately. She had chosen Margaret specifically because she understood suffering, understood what it meant to be deemed worthless by a world that measured women only by their wombs. Edmund appeared in the doorway. Margaret. What? He saw the journal, the tears. What is it? She handed him the diary wordlessly. He read in silence, his jaw tightening with each page. When he finished, he sank into the chair beside her. She knew Ashford would kill him, Edmund said hoarsely. Her own father. Catherine chose me not because I'm barren, Margaret whispered, but because I'm free. No child to protect, no reputation to preserve. I had nothing left to lose, which means I had everything to give. She looked at Samuel sleeping peacefully in his cradle. She trusted me with the most precious thing she had. Edmund's hand found hers. We won't fail her. A knock sounded downstairs. Urgent, insistent. They exchanged a glance, fear sharp between them. Mrs. Hewitt appeared moments later, her face pale. Your Graces. A messenger. From London. The letter bore the Lord Chancellor's seal. Edmund broke it open, read aloud. Your Grace, I was deeply moved to hear of the blessed arrival of your son. As an old friend of the family, I hope you will permit me to call upon Thornfield in 3 days' time to offer my congratulations in person and pay my respects to the Duchess. Yours in service, Lord Chancellor Ashford. Margaret's hands went numb. Edmund crumpled the letter. He's coming. In 3 days. They looked at each other across the nursery, across the sleeping child who had become their entire world. Do we run? Margaret asked. Edmund's jaw set. No. We fight. They had 3 days to build a fortress from fabrications. Edmund worked through the night in his study, forging documents with meticulous care. Birth records dated 6 weeks prior, signed by a midwife who'd conveniently left the county. Household ledgers showing Margaret's arrival at Thornfield in early October. Letters to London physicians cancelling appointments due to delicate circumstances requiring privacy. Margaret memorized her story until the lies felt like truth. She had fled London after a fainting spell, come to Thornfield seeking rest. The pregnancy had revealed itself weeks later. She'd been too afraid after the previous losses to tell anyone, even Edmund. The birth had been difficult but mercifully quick, attended only by Mrs. Hewitt and the traveling midwife. Again, Edmund said on the second night, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. I arrived October 3rd, Margaret recited. I felt unwell within a fortnight. By November I was certain. I sent for you on the 20th after Samuel was born. Why didn't you write sooner? I was terrified of losing another child, of disappointing you again. Edmund's expression flickered with pain at how easily that particular lie came to her lips. Because it wasn't entirely a lie, was it? She had disappointed him, had lived in terror of it for years. It will hold, he said finally. It has to. But Margaret saw the doubt in his eyes. On the third morning she found him in the library, sealing letters with black wax. What are those? Edmund didn't look up. Insurance. Letters detailing Prince Henry's affair with Catherine Ashford. Dates. Locations. Witnesses. If anything happens to Samuel, if Ashford tries to take him, these go to every newspaper and gossip sheet in London. He met her gaze. Mutually assured destruction. The Crown can't afford the scandal of a royal bastard hunt any more than Ashford can afford his daughter's shame made public. You'd destroy your own standing at court. I'd burn it all down before I let him take Samuel. Margaret's throat tightened. This man, this stranger she'd married 7 years ago, had become someone she didn't recognize. Someone willing to sacrifice everything. What if I'm not enough? The words escaped before she could stop them. What if he sees through me? What if he takes Samuel and I can't? Edmund crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands. You've already done the impossible, Margaret. You've made me believe in something other than duty. You've made this hollow house feel like a home. You've taken a child marked for death and given him a chance at life. His thumbs brushed away her tears. You are enough. You've always been enough. She kissed him then, desperately, fearfully, a drowning woman seeking air. He responded with equal fervor, years of distance collapsing in an instant. When they broke apart, both breathless, Edmund rested his forehead against hers. When this is over, he whispered, tell me what you wanted. Before all of this. Before marriage and duty and failed treatments. What did you dream of? Margaret's voice was small. I wanted to be a scholar. To write. To study history and philosophy and prove that women's minds are as sharp as men's. Then that's what you'll do. We'll build that life. All three of us. The next day, they took Samuel to the village church. Reverend Morehouse performed the baptism with solemn ceremony, water trickling over the baby's downy head as he wailed his protest. I baptize thee, Samuel Edmund Fairleigh, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. The lie became sacrament, witnessed by God and congregation alike. Son of the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield, the Reverend intoned. Margaret felt the weight of those words settle over them like a shroud. There was no going back now. That evening they dressed in their finest. Margaret in dove-gray silk, Edmund in formal black. They looked every inch the noble couple receiving an honored guest. Mrs. Yates waited in the nursery with Samuel, under strict instructions not to emerge until summoned. Edmund stood at the drawing-room window, watching the drive. He's here. Margaret joined him. A black carriage rolled toward the manor, drawn by 4 matched horses. The Ashford crest gleamed on the door, gold eagle clutching a sword. Edmund's hand found hers. Squeezed once. Together, he said. Together. They walked to the entrance hall and stood side by side as the carriage halted. The door opened. A footman lowered the steps. Lord Chancellor Ashford descended. Tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed. His face was a mask of polite interest, but his eyes were cold as winter stone. He mounted the steps, smiled. "Your Graces, how delightful to finally meet the miraculous child." Margaret's blood turned to ice. The fortress of lies stood ready. Now they would see if it could withstand siege. Lord Ashford swept into Thornfield's drawing room as if he owned it, his gaze cataloguing every detail with predatory precision. Margaret forced herself to smile, to play the gracious hostess despite the terror clawing at her throat. "Your Grace, Duchess." He inclined his head with practiced courtesy. "I heard rumors of a blessed event. Forgive my presumption in calling unannounced, but I simply had to offer my congratulations in person." "You are most kind, Lord Chancellor." Margaret's voice remained steady, though her hands trembled as she poured tea. "We've been keeping the matter quiet after," she let her voice catch, "after the previous disappointments." Of course. Ashford accepted the cup, his cold eyes never leaving her face. "How wise to guard your hope. When was the child born, if I may ask?" "November 20th, Edmund interjected smoothly. "A healthy boy. 8 pounds, remarkably vigorous." "And you attended the birth, Your Grace?" "I arrived shortly after. Margaret sent word when her time came." Ashford sipped his tea. Strange that no physician was summoned. Surely, given the Duchess's history. "We had a midwife," Margaret said. "Mrs. Garrett from the next county. She's since returned home." How convenient. The word hung in the air like a blade. Mrs. Hewitt entered with refreshments. Ashford turned his attention to her with disturbing casualness. "You must have been overjoyed, Mrs. Hewitt, when her Grace's condition became apparent." The housekeeper didn't miss a beat. "Indeed, my lord. A blessing after so much sorrow." "And you were present at the birth?" "I assisted the midwife, my lord. It was my honor." Ashford smiled thinly. "How devoted you all are." The interrogation continued through tea, probing, circling, searching for cracks in their story. Edmund parried each question with aristocratic deflection. Then Ashford set Margaret
down his
performed maternal
"Might I
pride
see
with an
the boy?
actress's precision. "I've always had a fondness for children." Margaret's chest constricted. "He's sleeping. I'd rather not disturb. Surely a brief visit wouldn't harm him. Unless there's some reason you'd prefer I didn't." The trap was sprung. Refuse, and confirm his suspicions. Agree, and let him see Samuel's face, Catherine's eyes, Henry's mouth. Of course not. Margaret rose, pulse hammering. "Follow me." They climbed the stairs in terrible silence. Margaret led him to the nursery, where Mrs. Yates sat rocking Samuel. The baby was awake, gurgling contentedly. Ashford stepped closer, studying Samuel's features with an intensity that made Margaret's skin crawl. "May I?" He reached for the child. "No." The word came out sharp, instinctive. Margaret snatched Samuel away, clutching him to her chest. He doesn't like strangers." Ashford's expression shifted. Something dark and knowing flickered behind his eyes. "I see." He stepped back. Protective. "How maternal of you, Your Grace." They returned to the drawing room. Ashford remained standing, his civility finally cracking. "My daughter died in childbirth 3 weeks ago," he said quietly. "Her child vanished. I've spent considerable resources searching for him, and now I find the Barren Duchess of Thornfield has miraculously produced an heir." He smiled without warmth. "How providential." Margaret's hands clenched. "Your daughter was my friend, Lord Chancellor. Before she died, she entrusted me with something precious. Not a scandal to be buried, a life to be protected." Ashford's face went rigid. "You admit it." "I admit nothing except that Samuel is my son. Legally, spiritually, in every way that matters." He is my grandson, my blood. He is a child you would murder to preserve your reputation." The words fell like stones into water. Ashford's hand trembled as he reached into his coat, withdrew a folded document. "I have a warrant from the king's magistrate to search this property and seize any child of questionable provenance." Edmund stepped forward. "You'll do no such thing. You would defy the crown? I would protect my family." Edmund's voice was ice. "That document is worth nothing without the king's guard to enforce it. And you came alone, Lord Chancellor. Why? Because you know the scandal this would create. Because you know what happens if the truth emerges." Ashford's jaw clenched. "You're bluffing." "Try me." Edmund's smile was dangerous. "I have letters, witnesses, evidence of Prince Henry's affair with your daughter. Every sordid detail ready to be published in every gossip sheet from London to Edinburgh. You move against us and I'll destroy you both." The silence stretched taut. Finally, Ashford folded the warrant with shaking hands. "You have until tomorrow. I'll return with the king's guard, and we'll see how far your bluff extends." He turned and strode from the room, his footsteps echoing down the hall. The front door slammed. Margaret's knees gave out. Edmund caught her, held her upright as the carriage rolled away. "We have one night," he said hoarsely. "One night to decide." Margaret looked down at Samuel, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Then we'd better make it count." They stood in the library as midnight bells tolled. A map of escape routes spread across Edmund's desk. 3 horses waiting in the stable. Money sewn into the lining of traveling cloaks. A ship leaving Portsmouth at dawn. "We could be in France by week's end," Edmund said quietly. "Start over. New names, new lives." Margaret looked at him across the desk, then at Samuel sleeping in the cradle they'd brought downstairs. She thought of 3 years running from her failures. 3 years of hiding from mirrors and whispers and the woman she'd become. "No." Edmund's head snapped up. "Margaret, I have run my entire life. From judgment, from failure, from myself." Her voice was steady, certain. "Not anymore. This is our home. Samuel is our son. If Ashford wants him, he'll have to go through me." Edmund stared at her for a long moment. Then he swept the map aside and reached for his correspondence kit. "Then we make our stand here." He worked through the night, sealing letters to 3 allies at court. Men who owed him favors, men who had no love for Ashford's political maneuvering. Each letter contained copies of Prince Henry's love notes to Catherine, witness statements, damning evidence. By dawn, the blackmail would be armed and distributed. At first light, Margaret and Edmund moved Samuel to the priest's hole, a hidden chamber behind the library fireplace, relic of Catholic persecution centuries past. Mrs. Yates went with him, armed with enough supplies for a day. "No matter what happens," Margaret whispered, kissing Samuel's forehead, "you stay quiet. You stay safe." The baby gurgled, oblivious to the storm gathering outside. Ashford's carriage arrived as the sun broke over the hills, accompanied by 6 mounted guards bearing the king's colors. Margaret and Edmund met them in the great hall, dressed in formal attire, standing united at the foot of the stairs. Ashford descended from the carriage like an avenging angel, the warrant clutched in his hand. "Your Grace, Duchess, I trust you've reconsidered." "We have nothing to reconsider," Edmund said coldly. "You have no authority here. I have the king's warrant." "Show it to me." Ashford thrust the document forward. Edmund examined it with deliberate slowness, then handed it back. "This authorizes search and seizure of property suspected in treason. We harbor no traitors here." "You harbor my grandson. We harbor our son." Margaret stepped forward, her voice ringing through the hall. "Samuel Edmund Fairleigh, baptized in the church, recorded in the parish register, witnessed by the community. Your grandson is dead, Lord Chancellor, buried with your daughter. Whatever child you seek, you won't find him here." Ashford's face purpled. You lying. You call me Barren as though it's a curse, Margaret continued, her voice rising. But I see now it was preparation. God did not close my womb. He opened my arms for a child the world wanted to destroy. You can take my title, my lands, my life. But you will not take my son. Enough of this. Ashford turned to the guards. Search the house. Find the child. The guards moved forward. Edmund didn't flinch. You might want to reconsider, Lord Chancellor. Is that a threat? It's a fact. The letters are already in circulation. By noon, every member of Parliament will know about Prince Henry's affair with Catherine Ashford. The king cannot afford the scandal of murdering his own nephew. Samuel lives or you all burn. Ashford went still. You're bluffing. Try me. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ashford lunged, not for Edmund but for Margaret. He seized her arm, his grip brutal. Tell me where he is. Never. He raised his hand to strike her. Edmund's fist connected with Ashford's jaw before the blow could land. The Lord Chancellor stumbled backward, blood streaming from his split lip. The guards reached for their weapons. Touch my wife again, Edmund said quietly, and rank be damned, I will kill you. Mrs. Hewitt appeared in the doorway, flanked by the stable boys and groundskeeper. The household staff, all of them, forming a wall between their employers and the Crown's men. You've lost, Edmund said. The evidence is out. The scandal is inevitable. You have two choices, negotiate or watch everything burn. Ashford wiped blood from his mouth, his hand shaking. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse with defeat. What do you want? Public acknowledgement. Samuel will be legitimized as our adopted son. The Crown declares the matter closed. In exchange, Edmund pulled a sealed packet from his coat. I destroy the only complete evidence of Prince Henry's indiscretion. And my daughter's diary? Stays with us. Insurance against future misunderstandings. Ashford's throat worked. He looked at the guards, at the servants, at Edmund and Margaret standing defiant before him. Finally, he nodded. It will be done. Witnessed, Edmund said, gesturing to the guards. On your honor, Lord Chancellor. On my honor. The words seemed to choke him. Ashford turned and walked out, his guards following. The carriage rolled away in silence. The moment it disappeared beyond the gates, Margaret's knees buckled. Edmund caught her, held her as she shook. Get Samuel, he said to Mrs. Hewitt. The wet nurse emerged moments later with the baby, who wailed his displeasure at confinement. Margaret took him, pressed him to her chest, breathed in his scent. Edmund wrapped his arms around them both. We won, he whispered into Margaret's hair. My God, we won. Margaret closed her eyes, felt the weight of her husband and her son, and finally, let herself believe it. They were safe. They were whole. They were a family. Spring came to Thornfield like a resurrection. Margaret stood in the renovated nursery, watching sunlight stream through windows she'd had enlarged to let in the light Catherine's son deserved. Gone were the dust covers and locked doors. In their place, painted wooden toys, books scattered across the carpet, and Samuel himself, 10 months old now, pulling himself upright on the furniture, babbling nonsense that sounded remarkably like Mama. There you are. Edmund appeared in the doorway, holding a slim volume bound in green cloth. This arrived from London this morning. Margaret's breath caught. Her treatise. Published anonymously 3 months ago, it had sparked controversy across drawing rooms and universities alike. On the measure of women, a refutation of biology as destiny. They want to reprint it, Edmund said quietly. Under your name this time. Edmund, the scandal. Let them talk. He crossed to her, pressed the book into her hands. I recognized your voice on the first page. The way you argue, the precision of your logic. It's brilliant, Margaret. The world should know it's yours. She looked down at the book, then at her husband. "You'd let me claim it? Let people know the Duchess of Thornfield published radical philosophy. I'd commission a second printing myself." He smiled. "You've already defied a Lord Chancellor. What's a few scandalized academics compared to that?" That afternoon, they walked to the village. The whispers had changed. No longer the barren Duchess who couldn't produce an heir, but the woman who stood down the crown itself. Shopkeepers nodded respectfully. The vicar's wife stopped to admire Samuel, who'd learned to wave and deployed the skill with reckless enthusiasm. "He has your determination," Mrs. Davies said, bouncing the baby on her hip. "And the Duke's stubbornness. Poor thing doesn't stand a chance." Margaret laughed, a sound that came easily now, unforced. When they returned home, she found Edmund in the garden she'd been planning for weeks. He'd hired men to clear the overgrown beds, prepare the soil. Now Margaret knelt in the dirt, no longer caring about soiled hems and planted roses. White ones for Catherine, pink for the children she'd lost, yellow for Samuel, for hope, for second chances. "Life from barren ground," she murmured, patting earth around the roots. Edmund knelt beside her. "You're not barren, Margaret. You never were. The world just had the wrong definition." The portrait painter came the following week. He posed them in the library. Edmund seated with a book, Margaret standing beside him, Samuel on Edmund's lap reaching for his father's cravat. A family not arranged by duty but forged by choice. While the painter sketched, Edmund spoke quietly. His words meant only for Margaret. "I married you for your family's alliance. I tried for an heir out of duty. But I chose to be your husband, truly your husband, the night I chose to be Samuel's father." His throat worked. "Forgive me for waiting so long." Margaret's hand found his shoulder. "There's nothing to forgive. We both had to lose everything we thought we needed to find what we actually wanted." Samuel grabbed Edmund's nose. The painter laughed, capturing the moment. Imperfect, real, theirs. That evening, they sat in the garden while Samuel chased butterflies on unsteady legs, shrieking with delight each time one escaped his grasp. Margaret held Catherine's diary, the leather worn soft from handling. She read aloud the final entry, her voice steady despite the tears that always came. "If you're reading this, you chose love over fear. Thank you for proving that some prayers are heard, even when spoken by the damned." Samuel tumbled into her lap, grass-stained and grinning. "Samuel," Margaret said, smoothing his dark curls, "do you know what your name means?" "No, Mama. It means God has heard." And he did. He heard Catherine when she prayed for someone to protect you. He heard me when I prayed to matter, to be more than my failures. She kissed his forehead. And he sent you to teach us that family isn't born, it's chosen. That love isn't about blood, it's about staying when leaving would be easier. Edmund's arm came around her shoulders. Samuel leaned against them both, his small body a bridge between their separate griefs, now shared. "Again, Mama," Samuel demanded, pointing at a butterfly. Margaret laughed and stood, taking his hand. Edmund took the other. Together, they chased butterflies through the garden until the sun set gold over Thornfield's chimneys, and Samuel's laughter echoed through halls that had once known only silence. They walked inside as one, Duchess, Duke, and the child who'd saved them both, into the house that was no longer a tomb but a home built on honesty, defiance, and the stubborn belief that some broken things, when pieced together differently, become stronger than they ever were whole. The Barren Duchess had returned unannounced to her country house, and found everything she needed waiting inside. Not perfection, not what she'd expected, but something infinitely better, a family forged by choice, sealed by love, and worth every risk they'd taken to protect it.